in specific and India's story in general. He was way ahead of his time and talked about the India story in such an optimistic manner. Of course, today, everybody talks about this. Sure, that within the next 5 years, in specific, India will jump and India's story in general and be the third largest economy. He was way ahead of his time. Recently, Goldman Sachs talked about the India story, talked about India in becoming the second largest economy by 2075. Of course, today, surpassing everybody USA talks in terms about of this economic size. Sure, that and actually the next 5 years about China in terms of what India will jump and India's story, then in general going to become number one economy. He was way ahead of his time. Recently, Goldman Sachs talked about the India story. Indeed, about India in such an optimistic manner. Economy by 2000 predictions with a pinch of salt. In my view, for several reasons related to our demography, we may be able to take our rightful place in the world, provided we put our house in order by investing in our human development. Before I go into details, I would like to be upfront about a couple of things. First, I'm not an expert on development. Actually, many people in this audience probably would know more about development than me. But on this subject, as a citizen, as Dr. Ganesh talked about, as a citizens like all of you, I'm quite concerned. So I'm trying to see if we can apply some of the ideas from the managerial field. Like Dr. Ganesh and few others in this group, I work on industrial systems we call operations management that focus on making cars, making cell phones, delivering goods and services to your houses through e-commerce firms. Each of these industrial systems has delivery systems. And scholars like Dr. Ganesh and I work on them. So today, I'm going to put forth an argument that certain innovations from our field can help us redesign service delivery systems in important field involved with human development. Here, I'm going to mainly focus on education and health. But obviously, it'll be a very limited perspective because we are dealing with a hard, wicked problem of development. So with this opening remarks, let me speak on 3 issues. First, we will see how we define development and examine our performance over last several decades. Subsequently, we'll examine our current approach to service delivery systems in development and explore ways in which we can redesign them by borrowing ideas from industrial systems. I'm going to argue that the direction of our current approaches for development is incorrect. If we do not course correct, achieving the economic goals we have in mind may be out of reach. Subsequently, I'll talk about the way industrial organizations evolved over the last 100 years. And we'll consider 3 case studies. Sector and 2 and BA. Based on his work, UNDP has designed Human Development Index that focuses on 3 things: One among them is a per capita income. Income is of course a very important part of human development, but as Professor Amritya Sen had argued, focusing only on income will be working with a limited view. Income is important, but if you do not focus on health and education, then the future development will not be sustainable. There are three components of Human Development Index: health, education, and living standard. Health is operationalized by measuring life expectancy. Obviously, this is a limited view of health, but does give us some perspective. While measuring performance on education, there are two indicators. One is that if we take the whole population, whole stock, then what are the mean years of schooling? And second, if a child is born today, then what will be his or her expected days of schooling? And combining these two, you get the measurement of education. Third is the living standard in terms of income per capita. So every year, UNDP brings out Human Development Index, where they measure composite Human Development Index for all the countries. Let's try and understand how has India fared over the last 30 years. I'm looking at a 1990 as a benchmark year because all of us know, that was a major departure year for our country. So in 1990, we were ranked 130, out of the list of 195 countries, and with a score of 0.434. And in 2021, which is based on a last report which came out in 2022, we are ranked 132. So we were 130, and now we are 132 with a score of 0.633. And just to give a reference, Switzerland is ranked number 1 in 2021 with a score of 0.962. So of course, we've improved in the absolute sense, but relatively we are more or less in the same position which we were in 1990. To understand India's performance, for comparison, we can look at performance of relatively large countries in our neighborhood, like China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and of course Pakistan. What's interesting is that all these countries have either improved or maintained their position unlike India. Except for Pakistan, all other countries have a better rank on the UNDP index in 2021. So I think this is something we need to look at seriously. And let's ignore this comparisons for the time being, but look at the progress which we have made. In terms of expected years of schooling, we are now 11.9 years, and we have a life expectancy of about 67.2 years. Indeed, we should be proud of the progress we have made on these measures, but I would like you to go a little beyond these numbers. For example, the expected years of schooling metric is finally a proxy. The bigger question we need to ask is, what have they learned? We should be considering whether the expected years of schooling will actually result in better learning. Unfortunately, we have not done very well in terms of quality, both in education and health. And that's what I'd like to focus for the next few minutes. Let's talk about learning. One thing in which we are doing good is that our children are actually going to school. So most of the children are in school. But the important question is, do more years of schooling lead to better learning? So here I'm going to use some data from the ASER report by Pratham. So ASER brings out report once in 4 years, and they provide information in terms of what's a learning outcome. And what we find that outcome has not been really satisfactory. Though ideally, when we look at education, we should be looking at a broader things like education should be opening minds. But I'm saying the least we expect that our children should be able to read and be numerate. Now, because of COVID, I'm not only going to give you data of 2022 because that can be misleading. I'm going to give you data of last three surveys, 2018 and 2022. At the all India level, the proportion of children in standard 3 who could read standard 2 level text rose from 23.6% in 2014 to 27.2% in 2018 and 20.5% in 2022. So even if we ignore COVID years, then we are saying practically 80% of the children who are in standard 3 cannot read standard 2 level text. Similarly, proportion of children in standard 5 who could read standard in 2018 and is 25.9% in 2022. Similarly, the proportion of children in standard 5 who could solve a simple division problem rose from 26% to 27% in 2018 and is back to 25% in 2022. So we're saying 75% of our children who are in standard 5 cannot do this simple division work. So when you look at this data, they're very, till you look at this data, you don't realize the enormity of the problem. Similarly, when we look at health, discuss improvements in average life expectancy. But if we look at important measures like child mortality and malnutrition, our performance has not been great. The under 5 mortality rate is 31 deaths per 1,000 births, and the prevalence of stunting, which is a proxy for malnutrition, is about 31.8% per WHO standards. So whether we talk about child mortality or malnutrition, you'll find our performance is significantly below what is again observed in a large countries in our neighborhood except Pakistan. So we're saying both by absolute and relative standards, we have a long way to go. And with the lack of proper nutrition, the specific stunting which we talked about, brain development would be hampered significantly, and children, when they join workforce over a period of time, simply would not be able to contribute to society and become part of the global workforce. So on one hand, we're happy that there are more children are actually in school, but it's quite depressing to see that their learning outcomes are quite low. Life expectancy has improved, but the level of malnutrition is high. We must examine what are we doing and what our direction is. If we are able to get the right direction, despite our performance lacking today, we still have a hope for the future. Now, in this areas, there's always constant debate that maybe we're not spending enough. What percentage of our GDP we are spending on health and education? In education circles, there's always this discussion that we should spend at least 6%. The question I'm going to raise is, how are we going to use that money which we are already spending? If spending more money is not going to translate into better learning outcomes, for example, in a education, primary education, then perhaps solution is not just increasing more budget. Let's look at what we have done in our school education. 2009 saw the Right to Education Act come into effect. It's a very noble act. Provides for the right to free and compulsory education for children between 6 to 14, and expects schools to have right kind of infrastructure. But would that necessarily lead to better outcomes? Our primary focus cannot be just inputs, that you increase more input, hopefully lead to higher output. Now let's try and look at evidence in this area, because the act came in 2009. And I would like to present some interesting findings from, again, a report by Pratham. So what they did was, they rated all the schools which they were studied on the RT infrastructure score. So basically, RT talked about seven dimensions, and for each dimension they gave a 0 or 1. And if you look at the learning outcome, and if you look at an RT infrastructure score, we found there's no correlation. We find that whether you had an RT infrastructure score of 0, or whether you had an RT infrastructure score of 7 or 1 or 2, the learning outcome score was more or less similar. Basically, surprisingly but unfortunately true, that more focus on those inputs doesn't seem to translate into outcomes. So there's no guarantee that money spent on input parameters will actually translate into improved learning outcomes. Well, nothing wrong with improving performance infrastructure. But right now, we're only focused on those input parameters. And with this input-oriented mindset, there's no guarantee of real outcomes. Later in my talk, I'll focus on such systems which focuses more on the outcomes rather than the inputs. One could perhaps argue that over a period of time, we'll figure it out our own way, like we have done every time in the past. But the reason why this is such an urgent issue is because we are at a unique point in time in our history. I'm going to show you some data in terms of our demographics. We're going to get an opportunity which we simply cannot miss. And this is the reason why we need to work with a strong sense of urgency and find appropriate solutions in the immediate future. By 2030, India's working age population is expected to be about 1.04 billion, with a dependency ratio that be lowest in our history. Essentially, in a dependency ratio, you look at working age population and dependent population. And as I mentioned, we'll have the highest ratio of working population compared to all the large economies in the world, contributing to almost quarter of the incremental global workforce. The working age population bulge is expected to last for next 30 years. All of us have heard about the Asian miracle. The Asian miracle was built on leveraging this trend. Japan entered the sweet spot in 1964, South Korea in 1967, and China in 1994. All these countries could take advantage of globalization and demographic dividend because they had invested in human resources in terms of education and health. India will be able to take advantage of this as well, provided we have a workforce which is educated and is healthy. Let me just summarize, our discussion so far. The bulk of our approaches are not going to give us meaningful results. Whether we talk about, the investment which we're making in a right to education, related infrastructure, increase spent on teacher salaries, I'm not too sure all this is going to actually result in improved outcomes. In general, the take-home must be that working with a high-cost approaches does not necessarily translate to successful outcomes. We need to develop models which are low to moderate cost while challenging ourselves and be able to come up with a more innovative solutions which relatively low cost and give us a higher quality outcomes. There are, also these models need to be scalable because, there's no point in having a model which works with a very small numbers. Let me turn to some ideas from innovations which have come from industrial systems. Taking the example of industrial production, if we adjust for inflation, the actual cost of products, say cars or cell phones, has gone down greatly as compared to probably 10 or 20 years back. We're getting a better product at a lower cost when we adjust for the inflation. This has only happened through innovations and efficiency improvements. So the question we must consider is, how can we apply these lessons to systems within health and education? There are many interesting developments which happened in the last 100 years in industrial systems. There have been many revolutions in the industry. The first major revolution initiated by Ford Motor Company. In the 19th century, before the advent of Ford Motor Company, we used to follow craft model. In a craft model of production, every customer received their own customized product or a service, but this was very expensive and the quality was unreliable. Now, over a period of time, we've reached a stage where we should be able to provide, or at least in the future, we should be able to provide the same kind of individualized goods and services at significantly lower cost using this innovation in industrial systems. As I said, it started with the Ford Motor Company, and relatively recently we are talking about various digital technologies through which we are working on those innovations. I think that's where the future is headed. If we look at education, similarly, every child is a unique, so that what we need to do is to give a personalized and a customized education to every child. Similarly, in health, we must see if we can move towards a direction where every patient gets personalized medicine according to his or her problem. I'm sure we're going to reach there in maybe next 50 to 100 years. But right now, I'm going to restrict myself to the modified version of Ford Motor production system. And can we apply those ideas in service delivery systems in primary education and primary healthcare? Let me briefly describe the differences between a craft model, adapted, and the model adapted by which was prevalent in 19th century, and the model adapted by the Ford Motor Company. The person who was assembling the car at Ford, unlike earlier approaches in a craft system, did not know the details of product engineering and production technology. However, in the craft model, the worker had the entire knowledge of both product technology and process technology, and outcome was dependent on the skill of the worker. In case of education and health, if we draw a similar analogy, it is the teacher and the doctor. So we've been following a craft mode of production system, where teacher and doctor are supposed to be highly skilled and ample knowledge. In a Ford Motor Company, they separated these two roles. They said the person who will design the tools would be different from the person who will be actually work on a car production. And with a result, they could reduce costs significantly and improve quality. Actually, we observed cost reduction to the extent of 80% during that time. I'm advocating that we follow similar ideas in education and healthcare sector. Let me illustrate this with 3 case studies, and I'm going to first describe this organization. I'll start with Gyanshala. And I want to talk about these 3 factors which I talked about. That do you have a model which is scalable? Do you have a model which provides quality? Do you have a model which focuses on outcome, right? And also works at a low cost. So coming to scalability, Gyanshala started with few hundred students in year 2000, and today they work with 24,000 students. They started in Ahmedabad, but now they have expanded their operations to 3 states. They work in Gujarat, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Let me show the performance in terms of outcomes. So here I'm going to give you data from a study which was carried out by MIT on those both dimensions which we talked about, the language and numeracy. The student language score was 35.4 compared to 18.8 in similar government school children. Similarly, in maths, Gyanshala children had an average score of 38.5 compared to 19.3 obtained in the government school children. There is this difference of almost 2 standard deviation, which is very difficult to achieve in any field. Okay. Let's look at a cost. In terms of the cost at Gyanshala is 1/3 of the cost of government schools. So essentially we see that 1/3 of government schools cost, Gyanshala is able to give a education outcomes which are significantly higher. So let's see how they operate. So essentially they work with the infrastructure which is quite poor. Later on I'll show you a photograph of a typical classroom in a Gyanshala. But they focus a lot on the pedagogy and the curriculum design. In terms of curriculum design, what they do is essentially the whole processes ensure the outcome, irrespective of the quality of teacher. So in their model, the teacher has relatively smaller role. First, they try to create a safe atmosphere, and most of the children work in a groups of 6 to 8. In every class, the design is such that every subject takes only 15 minutes. Because, it's been found that attention span of most children is not more than this. So you have each module which is of 15 minutes. Teachers spend only about 20 to 25% on the blackboard. For the rest of the class, the children work in groups. So it is not the teacher who is giving you knowledge, but the design of the curriculum and pedagogy play a central role. If the topic is subtraction, then the teacher will not decide how subtraction has to be taught. For every class, there is a detailed design, like which example has to be taken, and every child has their own personal worksheet. There is a daily teaching plan, and the role of the teacher is as a facilitator, not as a provider of knowledge. In regular schools, the typical teacher would have specialized education for 2 years, which is what I'm referring to a craft model. So the model lends more focus on the resource person ensuring they're very skilled and therefore the outcome ought to depend on the teacher. At Gyanshala, primary school teacher, so if you look at a second or third standard teacher, he would be typically 12th pass and that's all. But they will select a teacher who is from the same locality. Most schools are in slums and cater to vulnerable sections of the society because the whole curriculum has been designed, a detailed work plan is made, and the teacher implements it. So it's a very different approach from what you will see in most of the other schools. In some way, this idea is like that of Ford Motor Company. We have significantly lower cost without any compromise on quality. Another aspect which is very important, especially in service delivery systems, that nurses and teachers, if they are from the similar socio-economic background, then they would have better connect with the children. In general, whoever needs services would have better connect with the service provider. Unlike car manufacturing or a cell phone manufacturing, in education it is important that whoever provides service, delivers with empathy and dignity. So we're not selecting our frontline operators, nurses or teachers on the basis of knowledge, but essentially they should come from the same community and they should have a high level of empathy. So it's a very modified version of the assembly line approach used at the Ford Motor Company. In terms of the details of the model, for every 30 students they have a teacher, and every day teacher will spend minimum of 2 minutes with each student individually, doing less on the blackboard, which enables them to pay more attention to the students, and students get individualized attention. And for every 10 teachers, there is a field supervisor who will impart training and monitor. There is also senior field supervisor, and there is a highly specialized subject matter experts who designs the detailed curricula, work design, and all other issues. Let me come to the second example of Arvind Eye Care. Arvind Eye Care, has a facility which has got 14 eye hospitals and 108 primary eye care facilities in South India. It provides large volume, high quality and affordable care. 50% of the patients receive service either free of cost or at a steeply subsidized rates. Yet the organization remains financially self-sustainable. Much importance is given to equity, ensuring that all patients are accorded the same high quality care and service, regardless of their economic status. A critical component of Arvind model is high patient volume, which brings in with benefits of economy of scale. Arvind's unique assembly line approach increases significant productivity. And interestingly, Dr. V, the founder of Arvind Eye Care, borrowed initial ideas from McDonald's. Dr. V wanted to apply the assembly line efficiency that made hamburgers available on the street corners of every town in US at a price which everybody could afford. And he said, can't we bring those ideas in fighting this problem of blindness in India? The mission of Arvind Eye Care is remove this unnecessary blindness in India. They've been able to reduce costs significantly, ensuring high quality, and this has been a scalable model. One of the measures of cost efficiency, which I talked about, is roughly 50% patient takes free treatment and remaining 50% pay a market price. This would not have been possible unless they're working with a significantly high efficiency. And if you look at the scale, they do around 1,500 surgeries per day.
If you compare the productivity with the average performance of eye surgeon in India, then about, average surgeon in India typically does 300 surgeries per year. This is, I'm talking about eye care surgeries, right? Well, in Arvind Eye System, the typical similar number would be around 2,000, so almost 6 times higher, 6 to 7 times higher. In terms of quality, I'll not go into details, but if you see any dimension of quality, the quality is compared to probably the best institutes in the world. And as I mentioned earlier, the quality of surgery is same for both paying and free patients. The rooms in which they reside are different, and the peripheral services are different, but there is no difference in terms of quality of healthcare between both paid patients and free patients. It will be just interesting to understand how do they actually operate. If I just go back to again certain basic principles which are used in industrial systems, we do a comprehensive time study of delivery systems, and whatever an important resources, we'll make sure is not idle. If we find the resources idle, we redesign the processes so that all critical resources are used to the fullest extent. In healthcare, doctor is the most critical resource, and service design should ensure that critical resource is used optimally. In a typical surgery, the resource used are a surgeon, microscope, nurse, instrument set, and operating table. And typical output, we talk about surgery per hour. At Arvind, each operating room has one surgeon in each room, one microscope, but they have 2 or more than 2 operating tables, multiple sets of equipment, and multiple nursing teams to carry out key non-surgical tasks. The unique operation theatre layout enables surgeons to complete a surgery, turn around and start surgery on the next patient who's been set up on the next table in the same room. Let me just show you visually, just a photograph to give you a sense of, what is a typical operation theatre looks like. You can just show this. So I'll just show you a photograph of Arvind Eye Care Operation Theatre, and similarly also Gyanshala classroom. Next slide. Next slide. I mean, this is a bulge which I was talking about, which we're going to see in 2030. Next slide. So this is a classroom in a Gyanshala. This is actually a very poor infrastructure. They essentially hire a classroom in a same neighborhood where the students come from, right? Next. So this is an operation theatre which is in Arvind Eye Care, and what you will see is, what I was talking about, that there are 2 tables, right? And with a result, they also have a model where there are 4 tables, but they're able to use, one microscope and one surgeon. With a result, what happens is, when you finish one surgery, the surgeon, by that time the second, the patient on the second table is already ready. The surgeon immediately moves to the second, table, and there's a swivel where microscope also shifts to the second table. So with a result, and you have a multiple nurse involved, multiple instruments involved. So with a result, they're able to ensure that you have highest utilization of surgeon, which is a critical resource, and microscope, which is an expensive instrument. Yeah. Thank you. You can switch it off. Yeah. I thought, I can describe, but visually, if you can see, it'll give you much better sense. Okay. So as we discussed, they're able to use this expensive resources in a most optimal way. Similarly, when it comes to nurses, they do not work with the nurses trained by standard nursing colleges to lower their expenses. And their focus is only on eye care. They select nurses primarily from an empathy perspective, and secondly, they train them only for eye care. So again, the focus is on lowering the cost and ensuring high quality. So we see they've innovated in terms of their processes and the design of service delivery systems. Let me just talk about one more innovation which they have done in terms of their primary centers. They have a large number of primary centers in rural areas. So that now it's very difficult to get our doctors to go and stay in rural areas. So what they do is, it's paramedics in the rural area will do bulk of the work, and then you, for a final diagnosis, using telemedicine, they'll involve the surgeon. Okay. So with that result, again, they have a very innovative way in which they're able to ensure high quality at a low cost, and they're able to scale it up also. Now, you might say that, look, Arvind Eye Care is a very specialized eye care business, and whether one can translate these ideas into primary healthcare. So that's the reason I want to take example of, BHS, Basic Health Services, which is not a large scale model, but applies this idea for a 6 clinics in a relatively, so in a scale wise they are small, but they have applied all these ideas in a rural healthcare systems. So they operate in Rajasthan. As I said, it's a smaller experiment. It's a 6 clinics and essentially operating in a tribal areas of South Rajasthan. So these clinics are managed by, primary healthcare nurses, supported by visiting and on-call primary care physicians. Now, all of us know 2 out of 3 Indians reside in rural areas, and rural communities face a higher disease burden than others, but have much lower access to healthcare. One of the main reasons being that, there's an uneven distribution of qualified healthcare providers between urban areas and rural areas. High quality healthcare professionals are not motivated to serve in rural areas, and resulting in a high absenteeism and low morale. So even though government professionals get paid significantly higher, the overall quality is low and costs are high. The WHO has recommended certain interesting ideas in this regard. They have recommended task shifting as an approach for handling this challenge in rural areas. So as per WHO, task shifting involves moving certain specific tasks where appropriate from highly qualified health workers to health workers with a shorter training and fewer qualification in order to make efficient use of available human resources. A typical staff strategy is upskilling of nurses to undertake larger responsibilities than their historically defined role of assisting a physician. And BHS has applied this idea of task shifting in a successful way. At BHS, most nurses are sourced from rural and tribal communities in which this clinic serves. Nurses from those communities are likely to have a higher retention than from urban areas. In clinics, nurses are entrusted and credentials to perform preliminary curative functions and enabled to do so through continuous training, standardized protocols, point of care diagnostics, and easy access to teleconsultation. PHC nurses reside in the clinic villages, and provide care on all days. The primary care physicians live in the nearby town and visits the clinic weekly on our designated days and is always available on teleconsultation. The PHC nurses are also equipped with a protocol to manage patients with an array of conditions and standard operating procedures to ensure the operations of clinic are uniform and of high quality at all clinics. These are key principles which are essentially borrowed from a food motor company production system ideas. While nurses manage most reproductive and child health conditions as well as communicable diseases, visiting physicians manage most of the non-communicable diseases. Patients pay a small user fees for our clinical services. The result at BHS clearly shows that the skilled and supported nurses are as effective as doctors in delivering primary health care. Higher patient satisfaction outcomes have been observed with nurses as the first point of contact, and thus patients are more likely to keep their follow-up appointment with the nurses. The satisfaction also associated with greater engagement with the patient through counseling, two-way communication, and drawing from a context-specific real-life connect. Nurse-led clinics have been effective in providing specialized curative care and improving patient outcomes. Now, unlike Gyanshala and Arvind Eye, it's difficult to provide quality numbers for BHS. But the fact that BHS clinics are NABH accredited and their repeat business is an indicator of quality of service provided by them. In recent study, it was found that 63% of total patient visits were repeat visits. This reflects the quality of care they receive at the clinic. Nurses gets paid half of what government nurses are paid, and with a result, BH is able to provide high quality services, at a lower cost. Now we have looked at all these three successful case studies. Let's try and look at characteristics common across these three cases. All three are innovative, outcome-based models which deliver moderate to high quality service at moderate to low cost and at a scale. As we discussed earlier, our current models in primary education and healthcare are focused on increasing inputs, which does not necessarily translate into outcomes. We do not want to end up with a situation where we increase budget allocation on health and education, but the same is not translated into tangible outcomes. Education and healthcare are more manpower intensive. If we see the cost structure in both these areas, then the bulk of the cost is the manpower cost. We must now redesign jobs and move away from a craft model to innovative models which essentially, as I said, modify some of the ideas which we talked about from a Ford Motor Company. Of course, this requires a mindset change in terms of the way we look at skill set of doctors, teachers, nurses. We must support them with a curriculum, protocols, necessary tools which are designed by subject experts so that frontline people with the lower skills are able to deliver high quality outcomes. This is important everywhere, but probably much more important in rural areas where 2/3 of Indians live. And finally, it's important that we design these models in a way that we deliver service with empathy and dignity. It's not just that we lower the cost and increase the outcome, but we must treat students as individuals and patients with dignity. I'm aware of the complexity of issues involved. Because of system design, redesign will involve redesigning the entire ecosystem. So a lot of questions will have to be solved. But the key characteristic would require us to stay focused more on performance outcomes, and for that, a lot of innovation need to happen. So it's quite a complex issue and requires attention of management scholars and practitioners. So let me just try and summarize my observations. Yes, all of us would like to believe that this is going to be India's century. We are best suited from the perspective of demographics. As we have seen in the past, growth projections can be very deceptive. But history has shown, as we saw in the case of, whether it's a South Korea, whether it's a China, that when the moment comes, the country must be prepared to take advantage of the momentum. We have the right demographics in place, but unless we make sure that human talent is educated and healthy, we may not be in a position to take advantage. Unfortunately, our current service delivery systems in primary education and healthcare do not give us the confidence. Our service delivery systems are designed like craft systems and operate at relatively higher cost with unreliable outcomes. We must learn from these industrial systems that have delivered in terms of reduced cost and better outcome and can operate at a scale. We have seen this few case studies like Gyanshala in education, Arvind Eye Care, and BHS in healthcare, who have applied some of these ideas of industrial systems to come up with innovative models which operate at a scale. These low to moderate cost delivery systems operate at a scale with a relatively higher quality. We believe we as a community of management practitioners and scholars should focus our energy on this very important and urgent problem. It should not be left to health and education experts alone. It's too important for that. We need to work there with them and redesign these service systems. This would help the country in taking advantage of golden opportunity, when we have this demographic dividend, and so we have this next 30 years. And if we take care of this, then there's a possibility that this century can become India's century. Thank you.
Any questions? After reading. Yes, sir. Let the question
Sir,
answers
in
come.
my enthusiasm, I overlooked that there was a film on Sri and Yasaswy. Apologies to everybody for this.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes over enthusiasm is also dangerous. So we'll have a film on Yasaswy. I am sure all the young people here will admire. Please compare what an individual with little organizational business support has done for education in India, and particularly in the Northeast where nobody goes. I mean, that is the respect we have to show to a very great human being who has been in our midst.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूः मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि
This film will take you through the story of an extraordinary to Srimati Shobha Rani. He had a blissful home atmosphere, and the enlightening journey as a father, husband and mentor crossed all boundaries as the most rewarding and enriching experience. Weekends at the NJY home was always known for his warm welcome to his circle of friends and associates. There would be a fruitful exchange of knowledge and fun, delicious home-cooked food, and engaging battle of wits with his mother. The grand old lady would voice her policy of the spiritual journey as all-encompassing, while her son would try to churn out hundreds of conversations why hard work and commitment to basic issues were more important than spirituality. N.J. Yasaswy was fortunate to have lived a fulfilling and supremely satisfying family life. His phenomenal career began in a modest manner with a brief stint at ITC as a management trainee. Thereafter, Mr. Yasaswy joined as a faculty member with Administrative Staff College of India in 1974. N.J. Yasaswy spurned an offer to teach at the prestigious University of Singapore's Accountancy Department, as he informed Professor Bhanoji Rao Garu that he felt that he had some important contribution to make in India. In 1981, he started his consultancy firm Yasaswy Management Associates Private Limited, and from then onwards there was no looking back. It was in 1984 that he started the Icfai Society. In 1995, he was instrumental in setting of Icfai business schools across 8 locations in India. He was charismatic, a great motivator, never tired of talking about ideas, their execution, and delegating projects ably to people according to their strengths. He showed his prowess in corporatizing education and created a sterling model out of it.
If you are a man in a hurry, it is not the business to be in. And what I mean to say is that it takes at least 100 years before a university is really recognized in a true sense. The grandfather should study there, then the father should study there, then the child should study there, then the child's child should study there.
A pioneer, a leader, and innovator, NJY created Andhra Pradesh's first private placement industry, first leasing deals, first stock market newsletters, first management consultancy, and the earliest traces of knowledge society. He loved knowledge, science, and new ideas that changed the world. Yet, he remained humble, always working with a motivation to do something different, to make a difference to the world of business education, and publications.
I knew Mr. Yasaswy when he joined the Administrative Staff College of India in the year 1974. He taught finance courses. He was an outstanding teacher in that college. He also wrote books in the area of finance and investments, which can be easily understood by common man. He is extremely clear in his thinking. His motive was meritum ethicus, that is, provide merit, give preference always to merit, and be ethical in all your administration and management practices.
He had the flair to make everything look simple to accomplish, even to an ordinary mortal. A powerhouse of energy and enthusiasm, his repertoire of achievements in education is amazing. Whether it was the launching of the Chartered Financial Analyst program to make true financial management available to the Indian youth way back in 1985, or constantly updating it to suit emerging needs of the Indian financial markets, starting new programs for the changing needs of the reforming and liberalized Indian markets, or redrafting the curriculum for an existing program to align it with the changing business environment, he sailed through them with effortless ease of a true genius. N.J. Yasaswy possessed a remarkable sense of social responsibilities, aesthetics, scientific and intellectual temper, and cultural sentiments. What came naturally to him was his ability to make gold out of dust. A seemingly useless idea or an innocuous thing would spark a business model in his mind. And he was a great practitioner in possibility thinking. In that sense, he was a great economic naturalist, allocating capital to get optimal and even phenomenal returns with scarce resources. A gifted communicator, N.J. Yasaswy masterfully articulated the need for a new university with government authorities and went on to establish universities with competent faculty, duly supported by requisite infrastructure, designed the campus for a newly approved university, challenging great odds in his own inimitable style. Bequeathing the coming generations with a rich legacy of publications, he published innumerable books on current topics of management, with his unabated desire to bring the latest knowledge to the doorsteps of the Indian academic institution. An achiever par excellence, N.J. Yasaswy was, however, not one to court publicity. His favorite retreat was his corner chair, surrounded by his books and photos in plot number 19 Nagarjuna Hills, from where he generated ideas that changed the educational scenario. And his worthy emissaries emulated his ideals, touching the peaks of success and turning their mentors' dreams into vibrant realities. In the last 2 years, he started several new projects. Turning to his roots, giving his mother tongue and traditions a fillip, he ventured to promote Carnatic music, established B.Ed colleges, and also a unique initiative called C.P. Brown Academy, which is today successfully bringing timeless works of Telugu arts and literature within reach of the current generation. NJY achieved so much at just 61, and yet there were so many projects at hand. His entrepreneurial zeal never diminished. For his unrivaled contributions to education, Sri Yasaswy truly deserves a place in the history of the business scenario of Andhra Pradesh and Indian education in general for his life's work. Thousands of employees of the Icfai grew, including people, grew like saplings under the banyan tree called Icfai, which spawned the biggest service sector boom in education, research, publication and policy making. Some of India's most successful fund managers, analysts, bankers, journalists, software and management professionals, thought leaders and thinking elite have some connection or the other with Icfai. Either they worked at Icfai or they studied at Icfai and its associate wings.
Being here. After you demonstrate your passion, passion alone is not enough. I am very passionate about Western rock music. Not enough. Demonstrate commitment in terms of time and effort. Okay? All passion need not translate into time and commitment for various reasons. Okay? So this has to be done. Only then we will win as a nation where we should win. Please understand, he talked of HDI, we are not doing well. Take the Global Competitiveness Index, I am sure our economists will tell you. We came from somewhere near 110 to as good a rank as 36 or 37. But again we are sliding back. You know, we're coming to 70s. I'm talking to you as a fellow citizen, I'm sharing with you. I feel ashamed when as a nation we are failing. Why is a nation of individually brilliant people becoming collectively mediocre? I don't understand this. But time for questions. You should answer the question, okay? Sir, we'll give you the mic there. Yeah, the mic is coming.
Sir, hearty congratulations. It was an excellent lecture. I have attended all the 12 memorial lectures, including today's, and this was the best of all the lectures. Hearty congratulations. Sir, my question is, you have referred to, and rightly so, on the importance of outcomes. You see, outcome is more important, and we have given so many examples. And the three components you have mentioned, the education component includes, in my understanding, school education and college education as well. Now, everyone knows now the importance of the national education policy, which was created by the cabinet under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister, which focuses on important word you have used, outcome-based education. So, do you think it is going to help what the Vice Chancellor has mentioned, that we are doing so poor on the HDI? So, what is your opinion on it, and how we can? But the examples you have given are excellent, but my concern on scalability. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No, first, thank you for your kind words. And I think I touched more on the primary healthcare and the primary education because they are more foundation. But as you rightly said, we'll have to work on all the areas. One of the basic, point I was coming from, that probably we were left, some of the key areas to only those subject matter experts. I think we, from a management professional, need to bring in, so they are too important to be left to only health and education professionals. I think there are a lot of lessons which can be brought from other areas where a lot of interesting innovations have come. So that's first point. Second, as you rightly said, I think we need to be, to some extent, Dr. Ganesh was also saying similar. I think outcomes are important and we need to make sure. I think we need to move away from the input-based models. We said we have worked so much, we have put so many training hours, we have done so much. I think we need to have a hard look at the outcome, saying, keep questioning that input must get translated into outcome. I think NEP is an effort in the right direction. The only concern I have is we don't still have a roadmap there. I would have liked to see a more detailed roadmap so that institution can also plan accordingly, because there's a lot of work required by our institution. Right? There's only one more piece I would like there is, I think somewhere they should give a level playing field to Indian institutions. I think, it's good to encourage top, foreign universities to come here, but provide a level playing field to the Indian institution also. So there are just few observations, but just one more. I think just from a demographics perspective, we also have a window. We need to take advantage. The next 30 years, we are going to have this, we can become a workforce for the world actually. Because if you look at the dependency ratio in terms of people who are between 15 and 65, right? That proportion, we are going to have the largest proportion over the next 30 years. If we miss that window, then we're going to have a larger number of dependent population compared to working population. So somewhere we need to act with a sense of urgency.
No, I think you can hear me, no? I think I told my friends, please avoid technology whenever you can. It's very important, you know. And it's seriously. I think technology has messed up a lot in this planet. I'm not decrying technology. I think we should be careful and very prudent in this. But there is a point, Jayamar sir. I would dare say a passionate teacher, a passionate student who is passionate to share knowledge and the other passionate to receive knowledge don't need more than a tree, an open sky and good weather to produce the outcomes that we should. No, it's okay. Honestly, I'm saying, I think the outcomes will be great if I observe a lack of that thirst or passion to learn. Many people are lost in terms of coming into higher education. I think in our country we said this, no. I think many teachers, unfortunately, I don't want to comment on any individual, they drift into the education system. You know, they don't drive the education system. So I come from a business family, fairly rich in Madras. But I came into education because I fell in love with it. This is a problem, so it's a character problem, Jayana. It is not a competence problem. Sorry. Anyway.
The only thing I would like to add that I think it will be great if we have a large number of passionate teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can't hope for that. You know, we are such a large country. So can we design in a way that even if we have a average teacher, right? And a student who is not so passionate, but still we deliver a reasonably good outcome.
Better than what we are doing. Definitely, yes.
Yeah, please.
Make a comment.
Yeah.
So you talked about how we borrow from. So you described how you could borrow from management. Now, in the recent past, we've seen how, and this is not directly linked to what he's saying, but how we have had a few models in technology where edtech did extensive, and some have led to serious disappointment. So the marriage of these different streams also has to be very genuine. The educationists cannot take us to backward. That is the single most important point here, and so.
No, I completely agree. I was just saying that we obviously have to work with education and health experts together.
Yes.
And together design our systems.
Yes.
And also, I think one critical element, I'm not sure I communicated as well, is saying that finally we are dealing with human beings.
Yes.
We are dealing with a student, we are dealing with patients. So somewhere, how do we make sure that empathy and the dignity is an important part of this. So how do you marry all these pieces? That's why it's a very complex problem.
So do you think it is the case that India does not celebrate educationists enough? That we do not know?
No, ma'am. We have a late author who's in world #1 in case research.
Yes.
In fact, I shared this to the UGC chairman
Yes.
over here. When you are celebrating a sports person for chess championship or a batsman for something, why not an intellectual for his output? I don't understand this.
Yes.
We don't celebrate education.
Yes. That's what I thought.
We celebrate sports people and cinema stars. And celebrities are of that variety. But maybe that's the curse we live in.
Would you like to say something about that?
No, I think the only thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be at a national level, but if you're able to do it in our own communities, right? For example, ensuring that our alumni come back and recognize faculty, right? In terms of the kind of contribution they have made. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be only at a national level, but if you're able to create opportunities where we, so as I said, for a faculty, one is the peers, celebrating that, you get a rating. I mean, when peers recognize you as somebody who has contributed, and similarly your old student recognizing you. So I think we need to create those forums where we connect with our old students, we create an opportunity where we learn from each other, right, as a community. So I think the point is well taken, but create lot many forums.
Yes, one last thing, sir. You did talk about the numbers right in the beginning of your lecture, and I think that's where the heart of the, like last 30 years, I've been going back to our villages to see, and unbelievable how much village kids study, and especially with access to the internet now, the dreams they have, the yearning they have to study, take higher education, go out of the country, learn. But the thing is, our numbers as a nation is so large that no matter how much we are doing, it's still, we are really seriously falling short. So I'm so glad you brought up that point right in the beginning, that look at our numbers, While we are going up, there is still so much. And that somehow gets a little, to understand that more granularly is probably the single biggest challenge here to solve the problem.
Yeah, somewhere if we are not able to give that opportunity to a child there,
Yes.
right? I think we are failing there. When a child does not get an opportunity to get even the basic skills, right? So how he or she is going to be part of that global workforce? There is an opportunity there, right? But we are failing where, we're not giving if the child does not have a right nutrition, then you're saying,
Yes,
how is he going to
absolutely.
contribute, he or she is going to contribute as a citizen, right? Because, the brain development takes place during that period. So somewhere in those foundational years, right, both in the primary education and the primary healthcare, we need to do a lot more. And current focus seems to be hoping that just give more inputs and it will get solved.
It will get solved, yeah.
But, the data shows that actually that's a wrong approach.
And we don't know what is the fully right approach as yet. So
But at least let's allow more experiments, So for example, RT focuses on lot more inputs. And lot of interesting schools which are doing experiments but does not have necessary infrastructure will not get accredited. So somewhere give a lot more scope for experimentation. I'm sure you face all these issues in your these things.
Yes.
Our AICT comes and we are lucky in IIMs, we are not affected. But I'm aware that kind of regulations they come in, the kind of restrictions which come in, so allow more experimentation.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your speech. But sorry, I would fully disagree with you that more input can transform to more output, because the development theories and they says that more input will lead to more output, and your case studies are also saying the same thing. Like we are lagging behind in the development indicators, right? Because the ideal amount of budget which you said 6%, but till now we have not reached that 6%. We are running with 2.9 or 3% of our budget, right? So still 3% of budget are needed to fulfill the inputs also. So suppose in school education, the girls dropout in higher secondary education is high because maybe the toilet is not there in the school, maybe the school absenteeism, teachers absenteeism is high, maybe the teacher-student ratio is high. So less input is leading to less output, right? So in my theory or other development theories also say the same thing. More input can lead you to more output development outputs. Again, in your case also, which you said in Gyansala case, that is also referring the same thing, more specialization of the doctors, nurse, and more instruments can provide you better quality health care. So that is how the more inputs are needed to get more better outcome. Thank you, sir.
So let me probably articulate a little better. What I'm saying is we should move to more evidence-based, work.
That is why, sir, Abhijit Banerjee also they have worked a lot. So that provision of blackboard in the school can improve the quality of learning.
Correct.
Provision of this net, mosquito net can improve the malaria
Absolutely.
cases.
So all I'm saying is let all this come based on evidence. Rather than, we keep saying that let's just give more inputs, because I also showed you data that RTE infrastructure scores, which is part of a study, which showed that irrespective of the, RTE infrastructure score, whether you had a score of 7, whether you had a score of 3, or whether you had a score of 0, the learning outcome were similar. So to me, some of these are very disturbing. I think all we are saying is stay focused on outcomes, keep experimenting and see what works. Rather than simply saying that, more input will definitely lead to more output. Right? I'm not denying the fact that we should have more input. But keep looking at, so if I go back to the Arvind Icfai example, they're saying right mix of resources, right? If required, put more resources which are less expensive in nature. So they're saying put more tables, but use only one, microscope which you're able to swivel from one table to another. How do you use surgeon in a more effective way? Now, ideally you would like doctor to be there in the rural areas, but you also should realize that doctors are not going to go and stay there. So there is also a sense of reality. No point in hoping that I will somehow, make it compulsory for a doctor to go and stay there. What you will see is a dissatisfied doctor, lot of absenteeism and poor outcome. So I'm saying some of these are wrong approaches.
Sir, in that case, that is the misutilization of resources. That means efficient utilization of resources. And that is my point. Many things are misutilized in the system. So that way you can look into. But specifically this SR report that Pratham NGO they do. See, after this Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, right to education, the school education has improved, enrollment ratio has improved, but the quality is still lacking behind, and that is for other reason also. So that misallocation, yeah, we can look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I request Madam Srimati Shobharani Yasaswy Garu to come on to the dais and felicitate our chief guest. So we are coming to the end of the program. Regarding vote of thanks, I am privileged. On behalf of Icfai Foundation for Higher Education, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Chancellor, Dr. C. Rangarajan, for his continuous support in conducting the event. We are highly indebted to Professor Jain Shah, former Director, IIM Udaipur, for taking time from your busy schedule and sharing your valuable thoughts on improving performance on Human Development Index, redesigning service delivery system. Thank you, sir. I extend my wholehearted thanks to our Vice Chancellor, Professor L.S. Ganesh, for all his valuable suggestions. Thank you, sir. We are grateful to Srimati N. Shobharani Yasaswy, Chairperson Icfai Group, for her gracious presence Thank you, ma'am. We are thankful to Sri V.R. Shankara Garu, President Icfai Group and Board of Governors of Icfai Society for your continuous support all the time and your gracious presence today. Thank you, sir. I extend my wholehearted thanks to Professor J. Mahendra Reddy Garu, former Vice Chancellor, IFHE, and Distinguished Advisor, Icfai Society, and to Professor R.P. Kaushik sir, Professor Banaji Rao Garu, and Professor T.P. Das for your gracious presence today. Thank you so much, sirs. I take this opportunity to thank all our directors, deans, heads of departments, esteemed colleagues, support staff for making this event a grand success. My sincere thanks to branding team, press, media for covering the event and their continuous support. Thank you one and all. I wish to convey a special note of thanks to IFHE administration team for their untiring support in organizing the event. On behalf of our entire IFHE faculty members, last item is, on behalf of our entire IFHE faculty members, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Sri Enjavai sir for all his valuable guidance. We miss you, sir. Even after 12 years down the line, all the interactions, guidance, meetings, advices, all are fresh in our minds and thoughts. We are trying to take IFHE forward. Thank you one and all. Please join for high tea in big conference hall. Please join for high tea in big conference hall in the first floor of IBS. Thank you.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूः मा ते सङ्गोऽस्त्वकर्मणि.
This film will take you through the story of an extraordinary visionary. We pay tribute to one of the most resplendent intellectuals India has ever seen. The iconic N.J. Yasaswy, the man who founded the Institute of Chartered Financial Analysts of India, Icfai, and Icfai Universities and Icfai Group of Institutions. He leaves behind him a huge network of educational institutions that will stand testimony to the adage, what can be imagined can be achieved. Born on 9th February 1950 to Father Sri Nanduri Venkateshwar Rao, a school teacher, and Srimati Seetamma Garu, a homemaker, the quest of knowledge, the zeal to excel was instilled in him right from his childhood. The spark of brilliance was evident in him right from his school days. His illuminating essays on a wide variety of topics, even when he was in the 4th grade, captured the attention of his teachers, who appreciated and encouraged the remarkable talent in the young Yasaswy. The young boy was a keen and committed learner, and he never repeated an error once it was pointed out to him. N.J. Yasaswy had a brilliant academic career throughout. Graduating from the Andhra University in 1969 with a BCom degree, he topped the university. In his CA Inter in the year 1971, he achieved near impossible scores as first ranker and repeated the academic feat in CA Final in 1973. Simultaneously, he bagged the first rank in ICWA Inter in 1970 and ICWA Final in 1972. This spectacular track record of academic achievements reached its zenith when he was given the Basu Foundation Award for the Best Student of the Year from both the Institute of Cost and Works Accountants of India in 1972 and the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in 1973. A first-of-its-kind achievement in the country, an unparalleled performance which made his parents and well-wishers immensely proud. Married to Srimati Shobharani, he had a blissful home atmosphere and the enlightening journey as a father, husband, and mentor crossed all boundaries as the most rewarding and enriching experience. Weekends at the NJY home was always known for his warm welcome to his circle of friends and associates. There would be a fruitful exchange of knowledge and fun, delicious home-cooked food, and engaging battle of wits with his mother. The grand old lady would voice her policy of the spiritual journey as all-encompassing, while her son would try to churn out hundreds of conversations why hard work and commitment to basic issues were more important than spirituality. N.J. Yasaswy was fortunate to have lived a fulfilling and supremely satisfying family life. His phenomenal career began in a modest manner, with a brief stint at ITC as a management trainee. Thereafter, Mr. Yasaswy joined as a faculty member with Administrative Staff College of India in 1974. N.J. Yasaswy spurned an offer to teach at the prestigious University of Singapore's Accountancy Department, as he informed Professor Bhanoji Rao Garu that he felt that he had some important contribution to make in India. In 1981, he started his consultancy firm Yasaswy Management Associates Private Limited, and from then onwards there was no looking back. It was in 1984 that he started the Icfai Society. In 1995, he was instrumental in setting of Icfai business schools across 8 locations in India. He was charismatic, a great motivator, never tired of talking about ideas, their execution, and delegating projects ably to people according to their strengths. He showed his prowess in corporatizing education and created a sterling model out of it.
If you are a man in a hurry, it is not the business to be in. And what I mean to say is that it takes at least 100 years before a university is really recognized in a true sense. The grandfather should study there, then the father should study there, then the child should study there, then the child's child should study there.
A pioneer, a leader, and innovator, NJY created Andhra Pradesh's first private placement industry, first leasing deals, first stock market newsletters, first management consultancy, and the earliest traces of knowledge society. He loved knowledge, science, and new ideas that changed the world. Yet, he remained humble, always working with a motivation to do something different, to make a difference to the world of business education, and publications.
I knew Mr. Yasaswy when he joined the Administrative Staff College of India in the year 1974. He taught finance courses. He was an outstanding teacher in that college. He also wrote books in the area of finance and investments, which can be easily understood by common man. He is extremely clear in his thinking. His motive was meritum ethicus, that is, provide merit, give preference always to merit, and be ethical in all your administration and management practices.
He had the flair to make everything look simple to accomplish, even to an ordinary mortal. A powerhouse of energy and enthusiasm, his repertoire of achievements in education is amazing. Whether it was a launching of the Chartered Financial Analyst program to make true financial management available to the Indian youth way back in 1985, or constantly updating it to suit emerging needs of the Indian financial markets, starting new programs for the changing needs of the reforming and liberalized Indian markets, or redrafting the curriculum for an existing program to align it with the changing business environment, he sailed through them with effortless ease of a true genius. N.J. Yasaswy possessed a remarkable sense of social responsibilities, aesthetics, scientific and intellectual temper, and cultural sentiments. What came naturally to him was his ability to make gold out of dust. A seemingly useless idea or an innocuous thing would spark a business model in his mind. And he was a great practitioner in possibility thinking. In that sense, he was a great economic naturalist, allocating capital to get optimal and even phenomenal returns with scarce resources. A gifted communicator, N.J. Yasaswy masterfully articulated the need for a new university with government authorities and went on to establish universities with competent faculty, duly supported by requisite infrastructure, designed the campus for a newly approved university, challenging great odds in his own inimitable style. Bequeathing the coming generations with a rich legacy of publications, he published innumerable books on current topics of management, with his unabated desire to bring the latest knowledge to the doorsteps of the Indian academic institution. An achiever par excellence, N.J. Yasaswy was, however, not one to court publicity. His favorite retreat was his corner chair, surrounded by his books and photos in plot number 19 Nagarjuna Hills, from where he generated ideas that changed the educational scenario. And his worthy emissaries emulated his ideals, touching the peaks of success and turning their mentors' dreams into vibrant realities. In the last 2 years, he started several new projects. Turning to his roots, giving his mother tongue and traditions of Philip, he ventured to promote Carnatic music, established B.Ed colleges, and also a unique initiative called C.P. Brown Academy, which is today successfully bringing timeless works of Telugu arts and literature within reach of the current generation. NJY achieved so much at just 61, and yet there were so many projects at hand. His entrepreneurial zeal never diminished. For his unrivaled contributions to education, Sri Yasaswy truly deserves a place in the history of the business scenario of Andhra Pradesh and Indian education in general for his life's work. Thousands of employees of the Icfai grew, including people, grew like saplings under the banyan tree called Icfai, which spawned the biggest service sector boom in education, research, publication and policy making. Some of India's most successful fund managers, analysts, bankers, journalists, software and management professionals, thought leaders and thinking elite have some connection or the other with Icfai. Either they worked at Icfai or they studied at Icfai and its associate wings. The causes he expounded were noble, and it is the duty of his protégés to carry them forward.
This is the greatest tribute one can pay to him, standing as living testimonies of his life's mission.